Hey team, welcome back. So as I mentioned in the previous lecture, we do want to um, refactor this because as I mentioned, we are going to be needing code to perform this type of validation and actually return a key value pair of errors in case we're passing invalid objects. And since project is not going to be the only object that we're going to create here that's going to have validation, we might as well think of the future right now and actually set this up in a way that we can always reuse this code right here and actually return that every time there's an invalid object. So my solution for this, there are two ways. I could extract this as a private method and put in the controller and then actually minimize the amount of code that I have here in the method itself, in the route itself. But then again, that doesn't solve the problem when I have other controllers and when I have other objects. So my solution is going to be to actually create a service for this, a service that I can auto-wire or inject into other controllers and actually perhaps even in other services, and that I can reuse every time I want validation to happen, this validation to happen, and actually this type of error map to be returned whenever we're using an object that has validation. So I'm going to go to my services layer and I'm going to create a new class, and I'm going to call this class map validation error service, whatever, or validation map, or map validation error service. Yeah, this is a good name as any. You can name it whatever you want. I'm going to annotate this as at service because it is a service after all. And then I'm just gonna literally going to cut this out of here, which is gonna give us, I'm just gonna cut this out of here and literally paste it in the method that we're going to create, which is going to be a public method that returns a generic response entity. And I'm just going to call it the same thing, map validation service. And this takes a binding result, okay? Because remember, at this point in this logic that we cut off, we are basically taking the result and checking to see if the result has errors, and then if it does, then that's when we pass the field errors. Okay, so basically it either returns the new response entity or returns null, because I mean, if there are no errors, then there's nothing to return, right? So now that we have this here, we can come to our controller layer and then just bring in this service. Okay, there we go. Map validation error service, map validation error service. And I think that we can abstract this logic even a little more, but I don't want to get into, I don't want to get too fancy either. Like, we're refactoring, this is a good thing, but and we could probably put that validation at the project service layer, but I'm just gonna put it here. We already took a lot of lines of code out of here, so I'm just gonna put it here. I don't wanna. I really wanna keep my project service a little more straightforward than that, because there's gonna be a whole lot more logic in it. So basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do response entity of type generic, and I'm gonna call it error map. Again, and then what I'm going to do is then I'm just going to pass the map validation service and the result. So basically, I'm calling this service, and then I'm calling that method that we declared here. Okay. Pretty simple stuff. And then we can just do an if statement that literally takes one line, and it's if error map is not null, meaning it contains errors, then we can just return the error map, which is, as you know, a response entity that gives you a 400 bat request status. So very, very simple stuff. Now we have this refactor. This looks a lot better than what we initially committed. And actually, let me go back to that branch real quick, because I really want to show you, just so you guys can compare. This is what we committed, and as you can see, you know, we had a lot of logic here. We basically had all of this here, and now I think we went from let me see, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 lines of code to literally 2 lines of code. So this is much cleaner, this is much better code, and I don't want to get cocky, so let's just test both the positive and the negative scenarios. So remember, positive scenario is when it's supposed to work, and negative is when it's supposed to throw an exception. And when it's supposed to throw an exception that you want the system to throw, in this case, as you can see, it is working. This is really good. And then I just want to show you that I'm going into my database right now. Since I restarted the server, it doesn't have anything in it. Remember, the H2 database, it's an in-memory database, which means every time you restart the server, all the data that we put in there goes away. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And then we're gonna do the same thing here, and we're going to pass the project object, a valid one, and now we should have it on our database as well. And this is great. So everything's working fine, and we have, in my opinion, we have a much cleaner code, and we also have something that we can reuse in the future. So this is really good. Now, another one validation that I want to try that we haven't really tested, and I know that this is going to be probably a few more videos, is that we haven't tested the size of the ID, and we haven't tested what happens here at updatable false and unique false. But mostly we're going to start testing this one because we are not on the update section of the CRUD operations yet. So let's just try and see if this constraint is working. If I pass it 3 characters, please use 4 to 5 characters. If I pass it 1 2 3, if I pass it 6 more, same thing. And then if I pass it 5, it should work. Perfect. So now we have 2 projects on our database. Now, what happens if I try and use a duplicate and project identifier that already exists? What happens if I try to persist the same object again? 500 error message. And I know a lot of you are saying, how come? We just did a map validation service. How come that didn't go through here? I'll explain that in the next lecture.